Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with MetaGeek. Today's host is Casey Cappy. He is MetaGeek's Customer Experience Specialist. Any questions that you have at the end of the please feel free to submit them in the question box, and Casey will answer them at the end of today's presentation. Casey, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to present with us again. I am finished for now. Go ahead and take it on over.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Julie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. This webinar is going to showcase the core products that MetaGeek has to offer, and all these products are available at Microcom. On the agenda today, I'm going to introduce myself and talk about MetaGeek a little bit, and then go over some Wi-Fi fundamentals, which are pretty important to know in order to kind of use our products. I'm going to go over Insider Office, Chanalyzer, and Eye P.A. These are software applications that we make here, and we use these with hardware tools as well, which I'll talk about. And then open the floor up for questions at the end of the webinar. And so as for myself, my name is Casey. I'm the Customer Experience Specialist here. So if you send us a support ticket or anything, chances are it's going to be me answering that. A couple certifications that I have is I have a CWNA and a CWSP. And this is put on by a company called CWNP, which stands for Certified Wireless Network Professionals. And I highly recommend checking these guys out if you want to further your knowledge on Wi-Fi. These are pretty well-recognized vendor-neutral certifications, so definitely recommended. You can find me on Twitter at Kathyfi. Mostly I do support stuff on Twitter, but there's a huge community of Wi-Fi experts out there. If you just look at some of the people that I'm following, this is my dedicated Wi-Fi account. So huge community on there. Definitely recommend hopping on Twitter if you have any questions about Wi-Fi or access points or things like that. I work for a company called MetaGeek. We're based in Boise, Idaho, downtown Boise, Idaho. This picture in the bottom right is actually taken from outside just our office window, and we often make a joke that our Wi-Fi hardware is made from Idaho grown potatoes, as that seems to be what we are most known for here. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in and kind of talk about a pretty core concept of Wi-Fi, and this is that Wi-Fi is half duplex. But what does that mean exactly? So when you think about an Ethernet cable, for instance, you know that an Ethernet cable has twisted pairs of copper, right? And this allows direction or traffic to go in two directions at the same time. Unfortunately, Wi-Fi is not like this. Wi-Fi only allows one direction at the same time. So only one device can talk on a channel at a time. And so, kind of think of this as a one-lane highway where, traffic has to take turns going back and forth in each direction. And a lot of times I kind of like to think of this as a conversation between two people. If two people try and talk at the exact same time, they're going to cancel each other out. They have to wait and take turns and listen in order to, have a good conversation. And so with that said, Wi-Fi devices are the exact same. So when a conversation is happening between this, let's just say this is a Nexus phone or something, and it's sending some information to the access point. The access point says, check, I hear you, and it sends over the data that's being requested by the client, and it says check. Meanwhile, while this conversation is happening, whether it's Netflix or getting out to the internet or Facebook, all these other devices on the network, so your laptops, anyone's cell phone, and it just depends what location we're talking about, but all these other devices that are connected to this network have to wait their turn to talk, and they stay silent until this conversation over here is completely over. And so it's actually pretty fascinating that Wi-Fi works at all when you think about this. But I want to talk about some of the bands that are used, the RF bands that are licensed by the FCC. We have the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz. And the 2.4 gigahertz is, it's a little bit of a longer wavelength. In fact, the distance between waves here is about 5 inches. And what this means is it has a greater range. So we're looking at about 300 feet and this is indoors. So it goes through walls a lot easier as well because it's a little bit lengthier of a wavelength. Pretty much everything works with the 2.4 gigahertz. Any Wi-Fi device out there that you have is going to work with the 2.4 gigahertz. And as a result, it's also super congested because so many devices work on this band that there's a lot of issues with it, and also a lot of non-Wi-Fi devices, which I'm going to get to quite a bit in this webinar, also plague the 2.4 gigahertz. You know, things like baby monitors, microwaves, even tons of things operate in the 2.4, since it is you know, one of the few bands that are licensed by the FCC, or unlicensed at least. And so, and you know, another reason is there's only 3 non-overlapping channels in the 2.4 gigahertz, 1, 6, and 11. And so really there's only 3 good channels to use, and we'll talk about why that's important. On the 5 gigahertz, you know, on the other hand, the 5 gigahertz wavelength is a little shorter. In fact, so the distance between 2 waves here, ironically, is about 2.4 inches. And so because of this, it has a lot lower indoor range. We're looking at about 90 feet, and walls and things like that really stop the signal, attenuate the signal quite a bit more. And not every device is capable of the 5 gigahertz. You know, RF chipsets, those usually won't have a 5 gigahertz chip in them. You know, kind of lower end laptops, cheaper laptops, just to kind of save costs, they'll put just a 2.4 gigahertz chipset in there. They won't worry about the 5 gigahertz. So not everything works with it, but if you do have devices like upper end devices, iPhones, any Apple product really is going to always have a 5 gigahertz chipset. It's going to work in this band here. And as you can see, there's just tons more space here. So there's 24 non-overlapping channels as opposed to 3 non-overlapping channels in the 2.4 gigahertz. I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit of the history of Wi-Fi. I won't dive too far into this. I want to cater these webinars to be a little bit more about kind of some of the problems and kind of how our tools can help with certain problems. But one thing to kind of keep in mind here is all these standards, you know, as they were released through the years, kind of the important thing to know here is that in 1997 and 1999, they used this modulation scheme called direct sequence spread spectrum. You won't have to know that. But what this makes if you were looking with a spectrum analyzer, this makes a curved shape, kind of like this, almost like a hill in the spectrum. Whereas in 1999, they started using OFDM, which stands for orthogonal frequency division multiplex. And you don't have to know that again, but what's important is this made a bit of a different shape. This was more of a ziggurat or a haystack, a little more defined linear here, kind of like this. And so you'll see this a lot if you see 802.11a, G, N, AC, AX will probably look like that as well. And the thing to know is any sort of amendment that comes out, as long as it makes signatures in the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz band, our tools will see it. The WiSpy is just, you know, which I'll talk about more, it's just a raw spectrum analyzer. So any amendment that comes out, as long as it's making noise in one of these bands, our products will see it. They are talking about coming out with maybe something in the 6 gigahertz here pretty soon. And so we would have to, you know, of course, develop a new piece of hardware for that to accommodate that change in frequency. But again, that's quite a ways in the future if that does end up happening. And of course, as long as the chipset in your guys' laptops or devices support AX, our software will be able to show you that it's AX as well. And so I kind of was talking about, you know, overlapping channels here. So there are 11 or 13 channels, kind of depending, you know, where you are in the world. But in America, you know, there's basically just 11 channels, and you know, you can choose to put your router on 3 or 8, but really there's only 3 non-overlapping channels. And that's 1, 6, and 11, because there's only 5 megahertz of separation here between each channel. And so, you know, we kind of talk about and I'll get to this later, but if you have networks on the same channel, that's better than having two networks on different channels that overlap. Adjacent channel interference is not nice. And that's what this slide is for. So, co-channel interference is a lot more recommended because let's say this is on channel 1 and you have 3 networks. Well, all these devices will take turns to talk and be polite with each other and be respectful. Whereas adjacent channel interference, if you have a network on channel 4, a network on channel 5, and a network on channel 6, like in this example, these devices, since they're on different channels, they're not as polite with each other. They're going to try and yell and talk over each other. Kind of a good way to think about this is at a restaurant. If you've ever been at a restaurant and there's tables of people, and the louder that the tables are, you kind of have to raise your voice to have a conversation at your own table, right? When your own table kind of represents a network. Whereas co-channel interference is like you all are sharing the same table. So you're trying to be polite with each other and have a conversation at the same table. That's kind of a good way to think about this. And of course, there's one other type of interference, and that comes from non-Wi-Fi devices, which don't have 802.11 protocol to be polite. And so what, we're, like I said, things like microwaves and baby monitors and things like that. And so the way to really detect this is with a spectrum analyzer. And that's why it's really important to get a spectrum analyzer in your tool belt if you don't have one already and you're troubleshooting Wi-Fi networks. So this is kind of a good example, with Wi-Fi scanning, all you really see is network information coming from the 802.11 beacon. And so, this looks, you don't really see anything else. You just see that there's a couple networks here. There's one on channel 6, a network on, channel 6, network on channel 1. And then we have a few over here on 8 and 9 and 11. But what you really don't see is, looks like there was a non-Wi-Fi interferer here. So it looks like some sort of cordless phone or something right here, if you guys can see, is completely just taking up all this time here on a channel. And so any networks over here on channel 11 are just not going to have any time to talk. And so you wouldn't really know that this is happening with pure Wi-Fi scanning over here. You really need a spectrum analyzer, which is like our Wi-Fi DBX, to really see this level of interference, which is pretty important. And I wanted to talk about Wi-Fi coverage as well. So what you can see with the Wi-Fi scanning, a lot of people, this is probably our most viewed article, is kind of talks about what a good signal strength is to shoot for. And here at MetaGeek, we always, negative 67 seems to be the sweet spot. Basically, this is kind of the minimum requirements for, like Google Hangouts or streaming Netflix, things like that. You shouldn't have any issues as long as you can get this signal strength from your access point and there's not too much interference going on in your environment. As soon as you start getting down to negative 70 or negative 80 dBm, you're going to start dropping a little bit more frames. You might get that kind of lag that you see, with Google Hangouts. I'm sure we've all been on a video chat and it kind of stays still or lags, or the audio kind of gets a little wonky. But so just a kind of good rule of thumb, if you need to set your threshold with our tools, I recommend setting the threshold at least negative 70 or negative 67 dBm there. Our software also kind of uses 2 different grouping methods, and you can toggle between these 2 with almost all of our pieces of software. All the software that I'll go over today, I'll kind of show you how this works. Kind of the main takeaway point, though, is with physical grouping, this kind of helps you troubleshoot a single access point if you're having an issue with an AP. Whereas logical grouping will kind of group all the access points together so you can troubleshoot just a single SSID. So in this case, we have at MetaGeek, I think we have about 5 or 6 access points that all share the MetaGeek SSID. So if I wanted to troubleshoot roaming, for instance, and see how well my device is roaming from one access point to the other, I would switch to logical grouping and would troubleshoot that and kind of look at the signal strength graph and yeah, see if there's any issues with roaming. So with that said, I'll go ahead and open up inSSIDer Office and kind of show you guys what it can do. And when I first open inSSIDer here, I'm going to leave my Wi-Fi unplugged. So this is, this software will work with just a Wi-Fi adapter or the chipset built into your laptop. Like mine right now is using my Wi-Fi adapter that's built into my laptop. And so right now, like I was showing you before, this is just Wi-Fi scanning, right? And this is downtown Boise. And so you can see it's just, tons of networks. You don't really know without a Wi-Fi how much these networks are being used, but you can see tons of networks. And so what I'm going to do real quick is, I'm not interested in seeing all these networks. I'm just going to quickly filter out the MetaGeek network, which is the one that we use here. And so that's a little bit cleaner. This shows me all the access points that I can see. And of course, we have these test networks going on too. So it's showing me that since all I typed in for filtering was MetaGeek, so it filtered everything else out that doesn't have MetaGeek. I'm going to go ahead and plug in my Wi-Fi and kind of show you what happens once you plug in a Wi-Fi DBX. So now you can kind of see some color, right? And so it's going to start sweeping the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz spectrum and say, tell me how much the RF medium is being used in my environment. And again, this is downtown Boise, so there's going to be tons of companies, a lot of networks going on, and you can already see this kind of filling up here. And kind of an explanation of the color is red means that over 50% of the spectrum is being utilized. Green and yellow just means 30 to 40%. Blue means less than 10%. So, if you see a lot of blue, that's not typically an issue. There should be plenty of time to talk. These networks actually don't look too bad. You could actually still have a conversation on the 2.4 gigahertz here. And that doesn't always happen when, all it takes is someone watching Netflix, streaming YouTube, something close to you, and you'll start to see this kind of become a little bit more red right here. Right now it looks actually pretty decent. It looks like there's a decent amount of traffic going over on the 5 gigahertz, which helps offload the 2.4 gigahertz here. And one really cool thing that I like about inSSIDer Office is if I were troubleshooting the MetaGeek network here, if you go into physical mode here, which again kind of breaks down the physical access point, if I wasn't sure, if I was on the best channel here, you can actually just select an access point. And right now I'm looking at a particular radio here on channel 1. So I'm looking at the 2.4 gigahertz radio on an access point. And what's cool is it'll actually give you a recommended channel. So it tells you what it's on, and it says, here's what we recommend based on an algorithm that the software kind of computes, which I'll go over in a minute. So it looks like, this access point is on the recommended channel. That's great. Let me kind of go to the next one here. Okay, so here it looks like we're currently on channel 159, 157 and 159, and it actually recommends channel 52. So if we were experiencing issues here on this access point, inSSIDer Office is a great tool to just open up, click on the access point and say, okay, what's the best channel here? What's the most clear channel? Free of other networks and things like that. And so I would tell my IT guy at this point to switch that to channel 52 if we're having issues. inSSIDer Office is a great snapshot tool. Really recommend opening this tool first, and then see where you need to go from here. But you get a lot of cool information. And if you go to the channels tab here, and this is only available if you have a Wi-Fi DBX plugged in, because it shows you a lot about the utilization on a channel. So some things to kind of look for here. What I'll do is I'll kind of get a breakpoint here between the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz. So I only want to look at channels 1, 6, and 11. So this would be if I were trying to figure out what the best channel for my access point is. And this kind of goes over the algorithm that inSSIDer Office uses to recommend a channel. Basically, the first thing that it looks at is utilization, right? So this is RF right here that it's looking at. And so basically on the channel 1 here, I'm seeing 12% utilization. Channel 6, I'm seeing 8%, and in channel 11, I'm seeing 6% utilization. And then the next piece of data that inSSIDer Office looks at to make a recommendation is co-channel interference. So how many on-channel networks are there? And so as you can see, there's quite a few on channel 1, quite a few on channel 6, and a little bit less on channel 11. And then the next one, which is arguably more important because I talked about adjacent channel interference being more of an issue is how many overlapping networks are there on a channel. So channel 1 actually looks pretty good. There's only 8 overlapping networks on channel 1, whereas channel 6, there's 15, and then, it looks like 11's not bad either. It looks like 11 only has 8 as well. And so this number right here, the adjacent channel interference, this is weighted a lot more in the algorithm. If this is a high number, it's not typically recommended that you throw anything on it, even though there's not a lot of utilization on this channel. Just the fact that there's, these networks that could cause some issues, that kind of weights the algorithm a little bit more in the recommendation. Now, one thing to kind of keep in mind is inSSIDer Office is a basic Wi-Fi scanning tool. It shows you the 2.4 and the 5, but what if there was some sort of interference here that we didn't recognize and we wanted to kind of troubleshoot it further? Or what if there was some intermittent interference that a client was talking about and didn't really know what to do, and you couldn't find it right now? Well, that's kind of where Chanalyzer comes in. And so I'll go ahead and exit out of inSSIDer Office and talk about Chanalyzer, which is the deep dive into spectrum analysis. You really get to kind of figure out what's going on a little bit more, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So first off, if you do see some sort of signature that you don't recognize, you can locate it with our device finder antenna, and this comes with our Wi-Fi DBX and Chanalyzer. And you'll kind of see in Microcom sells this as well, but it's just a kind of a little directional antenna that you just plug into your Wi-Fi, and then you can kind of directionally locate that source of interference. It's a pretty neat little tool. And so, like I said, since only one device can talk on a channel at a time, as soon as you introduce a microwave or something like that, all these other devices have to wait their turn to talk. And here's some other kind of examples of non-Wi-Fi interference that a tool like Chanalyzer can really pick out. So this is a baby monitor, and these are super frustrating because they frequency hop. So you can kind of see that this started off here on channel 5, and then it kind of moved over to channel 9 over here, and then it switched all the way over to channel 1. So pretty much any network that you have set up on the 2.4 gigahertz wouldn't be safe from interference here from this baby monitor. So those can be pretty frustrating. This is a signature of Bluetooth. So if there's a ton of Bluetooth technology, this is what it would look like. Really, this was taken with just tons of Bluetooth devices beaconing. Typically, it's not going to affect the Wi-Fi. I hardly ever see Bluetooth affect Wi-Fi, but it is kind of an interesting signature. And this frequency hops really quickly along the 2.4, so it kind of is just like a clap real quick on the channels, and then it's off. So usually doesn't interfere with Wi-Fi. And this is a good little signature of a wireless video camera, which you don't see a whole lot anymore, especially now that a lot of the cameras are kind of Wi-Fi now, and so they'll have Wi-Fi signatures, but these are really nasty, and you'll still see them out in the wild. And you can see they're really wide as well. They're almost 20 megahertz wide, so this would just kind of shove everything off a network pretty easily. One of the best features I think about Chanalyzer is the waterfall navigation graph. So this is a lot like a DVR. You can actually just set your laptop, let the spectrum record, and come back an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later and see if you caught it. And you can rewind your data, fast forward, you can kind of pause and kind of pick out certain areas. And I think that's the biggest value here. This kind of is the differentiator between Chanalyzer and inSSIDer Office, is you can kind of record over time here with the waterfall graph. And of course, this is more of a enterprise grade tool, so you can report your findings with really great reports. Makes you look super professional, and you don't really have to know a lot about Wi-Fi. We throw in a lot of the wording for you already. It's just kind of describing what you're seeing or what graph you choose to put in there, and then you can hand this to a client. Whether it's a before and after, you've worked on it, or whatever your use case is. Sometimes it's really important to prove what you did or what the network looks like at a given time, and hand that to the client or business or whoever needs their Wi-Fi worked on. Finally, a pretty cool selling point here is if you deploy Cisco access points with the Clean Air feature, you can actually remotely log in with Chanalyzer using the Cisco Clean Air accessory. All you need is an IP address and the NSI key. And you don't even have to go to the area. You know, this could be across the country, and you can still remotely view the spectrum and kind of do some troubleshooting with that, which is pretty neat. So with that, I'll go ahead and dive into Chanalyzer here. And I'm going to open up Chanalyzer without a WiSpy attached. And I'll kind of show you what it looks like. And this would basically mimic our trial that we have. So if you just Google Chanalyzer trial, this is what you would see if you didn't have a WiSpy attached, which is pretty cool because you can kind of view some lessons, you can view some recordings, you know, a couple resources there, which I definitely recommend going over. But I'm going to go ahead and plug in a WiSpy and kind of show you what happens once that WiSpy is plugged in, which it does require a spectrum analyzer for this to work, since it is a deep dive into spectrum analysis. So it starts off scanning the 2.4 gigahertz right off the bat. If you want to sweep both bands, you can just click WiSpy here and switch to dual band. And this will then dedicate the resources of the WiSpy to sweep both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz at the same time. It's a little bit slower. You'll notice the resolution takes a little bit longer because it is dedicating some resources to sweeping the 5. To toggle back and forth, you can just click this arrow here in the top left corner. And then you can see the 5 gigahertz. And of course, kind of right off the bat, this is very similar to inSSIDer Office. As you notice, there's a lot of overlapping features here. And you know, of course, you can check the networks on and off. There's still the logical grouping, same exact filtering as before. So if you wanted to filter out MetaGeek, same exact thing here, and you can, you know, just check the MetaGeek network or the network that you're troubleshooting. So as you can see, there's a lot of similarities between this and inSSIDer Office. But kind of the key point here is when you get some sort of interference and you're not sure, you know, what's going on. So what I'm going to do is going to open up a recording here, and this is a cordless phone recording here, and I'll kind of show you where the value is here. So I think this was taken by an old MetaGeek employee, but kind of the thing to keep your eye on here is this waterfall graph. And so you can see it's timestamped. So you can see at about 9:30 in the morning, 9:31 in the morning, you can kind of see something happening over here. And I'm not sure if you guys can see, but there's like a little red line here. And so if you're not sure what that is, you know, and you don't want to wait until this recording goes up to that point, what's kind of cool about Chanalyzer is you can just click and drag over it and kind of select it, and bam, and there it is. You can kind of see it in the amplitude graph. You can see the signature, and at this point, you have to start asking, okay, well, what is this thing? And what's really neat is there's this interferers tab here that you can go to, and you can self-identify this. So let's just pull up a 802.11b signature and drag that up. And okay, that's clearly not it. 802.11b is pretty wide, about 20 megahertz wide. This seems to be pretty narrow band, so it doesn't look like it's Wi-Fi. You know, you can kind of go and click, here's an AV transmitter that you can drag up in the amplitude and see if it matches. Doesn't quite have the shoulders. Okay, so you know it's not that. Finally, you know, maybe it's this cordless phone kind of looks right. And sure enough, I believe that's what this was. This ended up being some sort of cordless phone. Actually, I think it was a Uniden phone that this ended up being, and that looks pretty close right there. So kind of neat that you can kind of self-identify these things, and kind of navigate this waterfall graph over here. And so let's say you kind of needed to prove to a client or a customer that, you know, this is what was bogging down the network. Of course, let's get the network going here and see. It looks like there was a network here called MetaGeek GN. So if you wanted to, you could actually just build a report here, and this is kind of what it looks like. And you know, the first thing I'd probably do is throw in the density graph and kind of show that signature kind of, you know, interfering here with the, let me get that back real quick. Just kind of show that signature interfering with that network. And, you know, at this point, maybe you could throw in the networks table and it would kind of show you where those networks are residing. Of course, you can kind of type in some custom notes if you want. It's pretty cool. You know, you can always type in whatever you want here and print this out, hand it to a client. There's quite a few neat things you can do with this. Again, makes you look really professional. And kind of like what I said earlier too, if you can't actually physically go to the location and you have Cisco access points, again, you can just go to the Clean Air menu here. This is an added feature. It's called the Cisco Clean Air accessory, and all you need is the IP address and the NSI key. And we have a lot of material on our website for how to connect that as well. And so what I'm kind of showing here, Chanalyzer and inSSIDer Office are layer 1 tools, spectrum analyzing, Wi-Fi scanning. And so the next kind of piece of software that we sell is called Eye P.A, and it's that layer 2 packet analysis software. So we kind of move to the packet layer. So kind of like what I was saying, spectrum analysis will kind of show you all the activity and the utilization on a channel. Packet analysis kind of dives deeper and talks about the conversations happening on a channel, the actual packets flying back and forth. So again, it's kind of important to iterate that Wi-Fi is half duplex, which means that only one device can talk on a channel at a time. And so, you know, this little, you know, access point sends some data over to this laptop. It says, check, I hear your request, and it sends an acknowledgement. And then, you know, here's the acknowledgement coming back over. And you know, if another device tries to do that at the exact same time, it's going to cancel out. And because of this, you know, it's kind of important to see how all these devices interoperate with each other. So again, you know, all these devices here have to wait their turn to talk. And it's important to think about data rates at this point as well. And so on the fringe of a network, if you have this looks like another Nexus, we'll just say this is a Nexus having a conversation, and it's taking a long time because it's so far away from the access point, and you still have legacy data rates enabled. So 1 megabit per second is okay still on this network, and you know, it's acknowledging, and it's just, you know, let's just say you're trying to stream a video or something like that, and this is just super slow. And the sad thing is, you know, all these other devices here are closer to the access point, and they're, you know, they're getting these higher data rates. They still have to wait their turn to talk. So they're still waiting for this this device over here on the fringe of a network to finish its conversation with the access point. And a good example that we like to use for this is this slow kid at the back of a classroom, right? Who kind of raises his hand and kind of grinds the lecture to a halt, and everyone has to like listen to this question, you know, that this kid has, and you know, meanwhile everyone in the front of the classroom is kind of ready to go on, or, you know, to the next topic, but you know, you just have to wait until that conversation's over between the professor and the slow kid at the back of the classroom. So that's kind of a lot like Wi-Fi devices as well. You know, all these other devices have to wait their turn to talk on a channel. So it's kind of important to think about, you know, this is information you see with Eye P.A essentially. And Eye P.A shows you this using kind of 3 colors, 3 basic coloring schemes. It shows you management frames in purple, control frames in orange, and data frames with blue. And I won't get too into this. You can really dive pretty far into packet analysis and packet capture and things like that. What's kind of important to know is management frames, they kind of help stations get on and off a network, right? They help devices get on and off a network. It's the easiest thing to know is beacons. Basically, beacons come from access points typically. This is how you know that an access point is out there. When you open your iPhone, you'll see all these networks populate. That's because they're sending beacons about 10 times a second. So every 100 milliseconds or so, every network that you guys see is basically saying, you know, hey, I'm this network, I support these data rates, I support this encryption, connect to me. And again, it does this, you know, 10 times a second. Just, it's insane how much this happens. And that's how your phone knows, you know, what networks are out there. And probes are kind of the opposite of a beacon. Probes usually come from the client device, and they're probing for networks. So you guys might not know this, but when you have your iPhone out and you're not connected to a Wi-Fi network, it's constantly probing for Wi-Fi networks. It's saying, hey, you know, hey, I'm this, you know, I'm Casey's iPhone, for instance. and it says, I'm looking for this network. So since I've connected to the MetaGeek network before, it's saying, hey, MetaGeek, are you there? And you know, I have a home network and it's saying, hey, Casey's network, are you there? And you know, I was at the Boise airport recently and I connected to that Wi-Fi network. So even that, it's saying, hey, Boise airport, are you there? And that's why it's really important, or back in the day, it was really important to turn off your Wi-Fi on cell phones, because they're just constantly sending these probe requests. And these are frames that you can actually see in IPA. So a lot of times you can tell that there's, someone's not connected to a network because you just see probe requests coming from a device, and you never see a probe response, right, which comes from the access point. And so IPA shows you these conversations. So it's pretty neat. You can tell if there's a bunch of people in the area around you that aren't, associated with the area, or at least they're not connecting to the Wi-Fi networks regularly. So there's some kind of cool things that you can figure out with IPA and packet analysis. But and again, there's tons of other management frames out there. We'll kind of skip over it. There's also control frames. This kind of helps. This kind of helps the management frames get delivered. So there's acknowledgement and block acknowledgements, which basically helps data get transferred and delivered. They kind of aid the medium of frames. And again, these two frames that I just talked about, I'll go back, management and control frames. These are Wi-Fi only. These are just for wireless transmissions. The third type, data frames, this is what actually goes up through the layer, right? This is your YouTube video that's coming from Google, and this is this is the stuff that's going all the way up and out to the internet. And so you can also see this type of data marked as blue. And QoS just means quality of service, so it's more important data. And so usually voice is marked as QoS. It's more important because if you're having a conversation, it's more important that voice is coming through, whereas maybe the video is not so important, right? That's kind of extra if you're having a video conversation. Voice is what you really need to have come through, so maybe the video feed probably won't be marked as QoS data. And there's a pretty amazing process that Wi-Fi devices go through to arbitrate for airtime. And I'm not going to go over this too much in detail, but this kind of just gives you an idea of how really miraculous Wi-Fi is in 802.11 protocol. Basically what goes on is every client device, your iPhone, laptops, whatever, they all basically roll the dice for who gets to talk first, because again, only one device can talk on a channel at a time. And what this kind of is showing you is this dice game that these devices played. So this laptop, for instance, rolled a 7, and this laptop over here rolled a 9, for an example. And so as soon as they counted to 7, this got to have its conversation with the access point, and this had to back off and wait its turn to talk until 2 more slots remained, and then it was able to talk as soon as the conversation was over here. So kind of what I want you to get from this is, every Wi-Fi device basically rolls the dice for deciding who gets to talk first, and it's a pretty amazing protocol that is built out here. And I think it's pretty important to use a packet analyzer to kind of see how this is working and kind of visualize the airtime. And so typically what people and customers have used is a tool called Wireshark, which is open source. It's kind of it's made by engineers and developers, so it's really kind of difficult to really know what you're doing, kind of difficult to visualize airtime usage unless you have kind of complicated filtering going on. And even then, it's definitely not made for a novice user. And so that's where IPA comes in. IPA really kind of beautifully and visually kind of shows you what's going on a network, and kind of gives you these multi-layered pie charts. Kind of starts off here showing you, the network that you're connected to. So this network, for instance, probably was about like this. And you can kind of tell that what this means is on this given channel, let's just say this was channel 1. On this given channel, it was using up about half of the airtime total. And then the next kind of layer out, it looks at the access point on that network. And so this particular access point was taking up about half. And I bet that this network was taking up about 3/4, it looks like. It looks like there was another access point right here. And then on this particular access point, here was a client, right? Maybe it was an iPhone, maybe this was a laptop. And you can just kind of see that this single client almost took up a quarter of the airtime, right? Because this entire circle represents all the airtime on a channel. And so you can just instantly kind of see that this client device was taking up a lot of time on a channel. And of course, since it's blue, you can see that this is a data frame. And so the frame type is that final outer layer in IPA. So once you kind of get used to recognizing what you're seeing, this tool just is an amazing tool to have to quickly see what's going on and visualize that airtime. And so, like I said, it's really easy to also see what types of frames are flying back and forth. And the more you learn about Wi-Fi, the more you know. You're going to want to see more data frames on a good, healthy network. You don't want to see too much management frames or management overhead, which I'll get to here in a bit. Right now, IPA actually supports a few different sources for packet capture. Right now, we sell the Linksys WUSB 6300. That's what we recommend, and that's natively supported in IPA. And this is an 802.11 AC adapter, so it'll get all your AC information. Now it's a 2x2 spatial streams, and what that means is if you have access points that are 3x3 or 4x4, it might miss a few data packets, or at least not know how to interpret them. So it'll still show it, but it might not give all the details as if you were using a 3x3 or a 4x4 packet capture adapter. So with that said, sometimes I do often recommend grabbing a MacBook Pro and performing a packet capture and just importing that PCAP in IPA. IPA is happy to accept PCAPs from other sources, especially the MacBook Pro or MacBook Air. Since they do have a 3x3 spatial stream adapter, it's going to capture more data. Doesn't matter if you're not using a 3x3, AP or device, but if you are, it's always good to capture as much as you can. And of course, we do have support for some enterprise grade APs like Cisco or Aruba. Some of those APs can produce PCAPs, and we're happy to take a look at those as well. And usually IPA can open them, not always, but usually IPA can open those as well. And so with that, I'll go ahead and open up IPA here and kind of give you a quick demo of it and kind of show you some things. And so first of all, we do have a trial for IPA as well, and this is what you would see if you were in the trial version. We have some pretty neat recordings here that you can open up if you don't have a packet capture of your own. But if you did have a packet capture adapter, and I'm going to go ahead and use an AirPCAP here. So if you just click capture, and I also have a Linksys adapter as well, so it wants to install some drivers, but I'm just going to go ahead and use this AirPCAP, and I'm just going to go ahead and stay on channel 1 here and start this capture. And so as you can see, once I hit start, it kind of tells you how big the file is getting and how many packets it's seeing. And so we're not even 10 seconds in, and I've already seen just about 2,000 packets. So you can kind of see how it's not meant to kind of record for a long time. You really want to kind of if you're having trouble on a channel or on a network, you really want to kind of run that, see if you can catch that problem while you're performing this packet capture, because in any wireless environment, there's just so much going on. I mean, look at how much I caught here just for 10 seconds. You can kind of see all this information already. And these are, like I showed you before, these are all the networks that it found on channel 1. So tons of networks broadcasting here, beaconing. And as you can see on the outermost ring here, you see a lot of purple. So this just means that I'm just seeing beacons here. I'm not even seeing really any data come through. Mostly just beacons. Here's a couple, here's an acknowledgement frame. So it's pretty neat to just kind of quickly see. Again, you want to kind of troubleshoot an issue or diagnose something. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a recording here that a customer sent to me. This lots of virtual SSIDs, which is available on the trial version. This one is really fascinating. This was sent to me by a customer, a network engineer who worked on a campus network. And I think they got the idea that they wanted to have just tons of different networks. They wanted one for the students and for the guests and for the virtual reality department and for staff and onboarding. and all these different types of networks. And that's just a huge no-no typically. And of course, they're having tons of issues with Wi-Fi, and you can kind of see why. All these beacon frames, all this management frames over here, these purple frames, you can kind of see they're all just evenly spaced. This is classic management overhead. Kind of the ironic thing here to keep in mind is that there was only 10 clients that this packet capture found. And, there's 35 networks. So there's, only 10 devices for 35 networks here. Just kind of silly. And you can actually see the airtime right here. This is almost a quarter of the airtime right here in this airtime graph is being used just from management overhead. This isn't even, no one's even streaming Netflix or, doing any actual throughput, checking email, things like that. There's almost no data flying around here. This is just simply network saying, hey, I'm here, I support these data rates. Do you want to connect to me? And so this is why we typically recommend, getting rid of as many networks as you can, virtual SSIDs here, because look at all these virtual SSIDs that you can see. So this is why we recommend 2 or 3 at most. Any more than that is just going to cause a lot of management overhead. And another thing I kind of wanted to show you here is a sample recording that I took at the MetaGeek office. So I'm going to go ahead and open this file here. And this was one I took of, I started the packet capture here. And as you can see, I started streaming Netflix from my iPhone. And so you can kind of see the airtime here. And I'm going to go ahead and filter just to this moment where I was performing that, where I was just streaming Netflix. And you can see that Netflix was taking up the entire channel here, which is kind of crazy to see. And you really wouldn't know that, with any other tool. And that's what makes IPA kind of nice to see, is instantly you can just see that this data was coming from this Apple device, which was indeed my iPhone. If I were to look at the MAC address, you can actually dive into the MAC address of this client here, and you can actually filter by this if you want to just grab only the MAC address of a client, right? Let's just say this was a problematic client. You can actually go to the packets tab over here at the top right, and you can actually just filter out everything going on with that particular client. So now that we have this kind of filtered down, I'm only looking at the conversation between this client and the access points. You can really kind of do some neat things at this point. First of all, you want to look at your data rates over here. So if I hover over this data rate, I see that 74% of the packets flying back and forth were at 24 megabits per second. That's pretty good. If you were to see something like 1 or 6 megabits per second, you'd be a little bit concerned. You know that maybe this was on the fringe of the network, or you need to disable those data rates, something like that. And of course, we had a couple occurring at really high data rates, 72 megabit per second. So that's really great. Being able to see that is pretty important to make sure that nothing's going wrong. It looks like there's a high retry rate here as well. It gives you some pretty cool information. But if you needed to dive even deeper into the packets and see some other things, you can actually, once you have it all filtered out and selected to where you want it, you can send this to Wireshark under File, Send to Wireshark. And so if you do kind of know what you're doing in Wireshark, and maybe a bit of an expert, or you have someone that can help you out here, you can actually take that selection, bring it into Wireshark, and of course, once you're in Wireshark, you can get some super detailed information. And we kind of deliberately keep this in Wireshark because there's so much to dive into here. And this stuff, we learn it here at MetaGeek, but we don't have it all memorized, and we don't work with it enough. So really, IPA just really helps kind of filter out and help you visualize those issues. And then even if you need to bring it into Wireshark, you still can, really super easy, which is great, and kind of troubleshoot those packets further. The last thing I'll show you that I really like about IPA is on this next tab over, you can go to Analyze, and you kind of check the network that you want to analyze. And we kind of have these insights built in, which is pretty neat. So for instance, this particular network, it says there's a high retransmit rate, 4.13%, and it gives you the MAC address of the problematic client. So you can kind of take a look and see what's going on there. And it has some cool solutions as well. So you can actually click Learn More, and it'll give you some kind of solutions. So this one says maybe it's a Wi-Fi chipset issue. If you click on this overlapping channel thing, it says you know, maybe there's an overlapping channel that's causing some issues, with this. And it says even use inSSIDer to kind of, track this down and maybe try and find that neighboring channel there. And then finally, it says, maybe there's some non-Wi-Fi interference going on that's causing these retransmission failures here. So it kind of gives you some cool suggestions. And the neat thing is we're constantly working on making these insights even more valuable. We're trying to get as much data as possible and kind of come up with our own insights to help you guys out as much as possible. And this, we update this software very regularly. So these are constantly changing. As soon as we see, certain packets or certain issues, we just keep adding to these solutions. And that's, I kind of see MetaGeek going a little bit farther in that direction, in that road of kind of automatically giving you insights based on just a packet capture. And we're happy to help as well. And furthermore, if you guys take a packet capture or recording in Chanalyzer, you can send that to the support team here, which, and we're happy to take a look at it and give you some further solutions, basically a CWNA in a pocket, basically. So with that, I think that's about it. I'll go ahead and give it back to Julie and open up the floor for any questions if you guys have it.
Hey, Casey, thank you so much for that presentation. Enjoyed it very much. Yes, I do have a couple questions here for you from our audience members. Let's go ahead and get started here. First one, you mentioned MetaGeek will be making a unit in 6 gigahertz. Is this something that's available now, or when can we expect that?
Yeah, and we don't have any plans right now. Basically, what I mentioned was there's this kind of rumor going on that the FCC is going to open up the 6 gigahertz band for Wi-Fi. That stuff takes really quite a long time to get finalized. I really wouldn't expect to see that for at least another year, 2 years, 3 years. It can really take a while if it does go through. Of course, there's a lot of kind of politics involved with opening up bands for licensing. So no, we don't have anything yet because there's no need for it yet. If that did become an amendment and the Wi-Fi Alliance decided to open up the 6 gigahertz for Wi-Fi, then we would start developing that tool. But no, we don't have that yet. That would be only if it was amended for use for Wi-Fi.
Understood. Thank you very much. Next question here. Let's see. With the spectrum analyzer, we can see that it should be used by local IT personnel. But is there any chance that you would release a consumer grade version for this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is all, consumer grade, consumer facing product. It's certainly not, only made for IT or network admins or things like that. We have regular home users with spectrum analyzers. I recommend pretty much anyone who has Wi-Fi issues, even if it's just their home network, to grab a spectrum analyzer. It's just a monitoring tool. So if you know how to use it, there's no restrictions or anything like that. I just recommend grabbing one for, any customer basically.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next question here. Who is best to directly contact by email to loop in with customers if we need more troubleshooting?
Kind of like what I mentioned earlier, support@metageek.com is the email address that I would use to loop in. Basically, that would just loop in me and anyone else on the support team here, and we'd be happy to take a look at the issue and help troubleshoot further. But I would just recommend support@metageek.com, that email address.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next question here. Does all the MetaGeek equipment come with Medicare, or does that have to be purchased separately?
That's a good question. Chanalyzer and Eye P.A, which were the latter two pieces of software that I demoed, those are automatically on the Medicare system, and you get 1 year free with purchase. Whereas inSSIDer Office at the moment is good indefinitely. It's not on Medicare. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Couple more questions. Is there any chance that your devices will be able to sync with routers to change the channels on its own, or are you not targeting that?
Right. And I've heard that question before too, and that's a really great question. And that's something we would love to do if it were if it were easy and possible. The kind of problem to keep in mind is that there's hundreds of vendors out there, thousands of APs and config managements. There's no really universal thing you can program in a software to automatically, get it to change the channels or do these settings and things like that. So I think that's always going to be up to the user to kind of make those changes. Our tools just kind of tell you what to do, what changes to make, right? We'll say something like disable legacy data rates, and then you kind of have to go into your router and see how to do that, because unfortunately every router, every vendor kind of has a different way of doing that. Some say, data rates, and you can uncheck 1, 6, and 5.5 and 11, and that would be the same as disabling legacy data rates. So they all have different wordage or verbiage, and so it's really not a super easy thing to do, unfortunately. If it were, we would love to automatically make those changes, but really it is up to the user. And maybe in the future, if with certain models of APs, for instance, we use Aerohive here, so we really know exactly what to do for Aerohive configs. And so we try and make those insights just more detailed once we know that, okay, you're using this particular access point, this particular router. Here's exactly the steps you need to take. We really can't get much more detailed than that, because even, you would have to know the password as well to log into the config. So at some point there's always going to have to be a human making those changes on the router or access point.
Thank you, Casey. Understood. A couple more questions. Can you confirm if there are any trial versions that are available for your products? And if so, which ones?
Absolutely, yeah. All the pieces of software that I demoed today have trial versions available. Easiest way to get to them would just be to Google, inSSIDer Office trial or Chanalyzer trial or Eye P.A trial, and the first link should get you to the page that you need for that.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, last question. Any new product releases you could share with us? Would you have anything on the horizon coming up?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I can reveal, but I kind of hinted at something. I think we're going to kind of go down this road of automatic insights, kind of like what I was showing you in Eye P.A, where we have those solutions. I think we're kind of dabbling in a product where you send us a recording and or some sort of packet capture, and we kind of basically give you some insights and help you make really detailed fixes to your router modem, kind of what we were talking about earlier. I have a feeling we're kind of going to go that direction, but I'm not sure how much more than that I can really reveal. But
understood completely. And when things get released and when Microcom buys them, we'll talk more about it, right?
There we go.
Looking forward to that, Casey. Thank you so much for answering all those questions this morning. And thank you to everyone for attending today. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. If you wish to view anything more that was mentioned here today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And remember, this webinar presentation has been recorded, and we will upload it to our Microcom YouTube channel so you can view it again. Thank you, Casey. Appreciate your time as always. Have a fantastic day, everybody.
Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome. Bye-bye now.